Good morning,
Good
everyone. Thank,
morning.
thank
Uh,
you for joining us on this Thanksgiving weekend.
Ishmael Modney and Tony Christ, Ishmael from Texas. I'm in Virginia, where I've been all my life. Now, one thing, we thank you for listening in. We are all about sunshine and transparency. We're not a Newsmax, we're not a Fox or a CNN or MSNBC. We're dealing with issues, social issues in our culture that are affecting everything, that eventually are affecting our living standard and our the money we take home. We're dealing with those kind of issues. Uh, we're dealing with changes that have occurred in our culture, and we're trying to better understand them for only one reason. Because if you don't understand where you don't know where you're going. So you better have a good understanding of where you are before you try to determine how to get to another place. Or you're going to end up somewhere you didn't want to go. So and we're very concerned that the nation is headed in the wrong direction. We are very concerned about the debt. When you're in a hole, stop digging. Well, our political class doesn't get that message at all. When you're in a hole, put the shovel down. Stop digging. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And right now, this week, we're going in debt as a nation, $79,000 a second, every second, $79,000 in debt. And Ishmael's going to the debt clock. We're going to take a quick look at it. And then we'll get back to our subject today. Uh, okay, thank you, Ishmael. We've got 33.8 almost. Maybe by the end of this call, it will hit 797 billion. 33.8 trillion dollars in debt. Not a way to leave our country for the younger generation. Okay, thank you, Ishmael. Now, Ishmael, why don't you start? We're gonna talk. We're talking the paper this week, and I invite you all because we don't cover the papers in detail. The papers that we talk about, that are our central topic, are posted on the website under consensus. And this week's number 14, it's titled "The Myth of Poverty." It's after a book written by Graham, Eklund, and Early. And it's interesting to me because one's a very liberal economist, one's a very conservative economist. It talks about another federal agency that honestly, taking out our fifth grade math, again, this doesn't require rocket science. Nothing we do does. Taking out our fifth grade math is not showing the American public a correct picture on poverty. And that's the title of their book. Now, Ishmael, you go ahead and start, and then I'll chime in. And I know you've read articles. You haven't read the book, but you've read articles on it. So what do you think about Census Bureau's last published number, 11.5% of Americans? That's somewhere almost 40 million Americans are in poverty.
Well,
And poverty, let me say one thing.
yep.
Poverty is determined by household under 36,000 and change in annual income. So anyone under that level in a household is determined falls in Census Bureau statistic as poor. Go ahead.
Well, what's really interesting to me is that number, 36,000. And as we get into this and as folks read the paper, we'll realize that, oh my goodness, 36,000 for a household in America. That's poverty. Being from the places where my family's from or having traveled around the world, people would think 36,000, my goodness gracious, that's quite a bit of money. And we're considering that poverty in America. And I think, Mr. Chris, your point in this as well, and somewhat I agree with, which is we we should be, as a society, celebrating that somehow we have managed to beat poverty when we add it all up together. And to your point, when you add in what we do to alleviate poverty and so the programs we have, my gosh, why aren't we talking about this? So it's a very interesting book. I've not had the chance myself to read it. I've read different critiques and different articles on it. It's a very interesting concept here around we have transfer payments to folks in this country to help them out, but are we actually accounting for that when we think about income, when we think about poverty, when we think about what people have? So to me, it's a very fascinating topic. And I think, Mr. Chris, the paper you wrote again on it as well. Your overall thesis and point is we're spending this money, we're stating it's 11%, but guess what? When we do the math, we've actually done a hell of a job to reduce it. So why aren't we, to your point, having the victory lap? Why aren't we talking about the successes that have happened versus, again, expanding things? So that's what I have to start with, and we'll get into this discussion more. But I do think it's a very interesting thought everyone needs to have, that we're spending all this money. We're going to spend over 6 trillion. Again, you look at the debt clock. Federal spending 6.1 trillion, and that's the official number. 6.3 trillion is actually what it ends up being
that's
this
also
fiscal year.
At least a couple trillion more than they're collecting. You've got to say that.
We're collecting only 4.4.
They're not nearly connected.
So where is the money going? And if it is having success, why aren't we talking about it? So I'll throw it back to you.
The thing, we're not going to resolve income differences. We're not going to resolve people that have less. But one thing that caused me to put this on the show, the book on the show, was we have another federal agency that's not telling the American public the truth. And that is very bothersome in this environment. And the reason they're not telling the truth is they're not including all the welfare payments. They're not including all the welfare payments in the number that the bottom, that the allegedly poor portion of the population make. And that, I think that's the central disclosure of Graham, Eklund, Early in the book. And when you add in those other welfare payments, and incidentally, they say, the government says there are 90 welfare agencies in America. The government says, Eklund and Graham and Early say there are 100. When you add in the other money, it elevates the bot. Now, one thing I will say, that the total amount of welfare doesn't only go to the poor. It goes largely to the bottom 3 quintiles, but very little of it to the middle quintile, the middle class. But most of it does go to the bottom quintile, the bottom 20%, of which the Census Bureau says 11.5% are under the poverty level. When you add in all the money, that number drops to 2%. Whoopee! We finally won the war on poverty. The number has stayed static in the low teens or 11 or 12% for 40 years. It's never really significantly moved. It might be significant in a statistical sense, but never really have you had the kind of movement people have wanted. So the issue has been kept alive. Well, by their own definitions, if you add in the money, it drops to 2. Also, another thing that I think is very divisive, Census Bureau does not take out the tax from the top 20. The top 20% pays almost 82% of all income taxes. When you take that out and you add in the money to the bottom 20%. Now that's a little more than the bottom, the poverty people, the 11.5, which now has dropped to 2. Okay. You end up with a 4-to-1 ratio. They say it's a 16.7-to-1 income ratio, that the top 20% are making 16.7. I think that's deceptive. Okay. I think that is feeding right into the mania out there, that the DEI crowd that are running around. It's riling them up. It's making them tribal. They're running around screaming about it. So let's deal with real numbers. That drops to 4-to-1. And if we're being totally honest, we've got to recognize capital gains, which are almost exclusively by the upper, I want to say 1%. I've read statistics that 82% of the income they make, and it's a high income number, is from capital gains. So when you're at that level, so there's that distortion too, that would distort the top 20%. But when you're dealing with in-kind and income only, it's 4-to-1, and there's 2% poverty. Whoopee! Why isn't the Census Bureau taking a victory lap? Why isn't the government taking a victory lap? What is causing them? Is there something else going on that's causing them to misstate reality? There's a lot of other ancillary support. I mean, we've had since 1965. In 1965, we had 13% of the population was overweight. It's 70% now. Obese is 43%. Extremely obese is 15%. So there's been calories aren't enough for life. We're not about just giving people calories. And this is going to dovetail into what we're going to talk about next week, which is the American dream. But it's very important. It should be to all Americans that the room full of PhDs at the Census Bureau isn't fooling anyone when their definition allows them to put out the wrong number, and we don't appreciate that. And you should let your politicians know, if you have any going to Washington, we'd like them to put out the correct number on income, the correct number on soft dollar payments, SNAP, everything else. We'd like to know what really the poverty level is by their definition. That's not a big thing in our world of problems, but it's another little agitation. Just like Congressional Budget Office telling everyone we're not going to hit $1 trillion in interest to 2033. Well, incidentally, since we discussed that about CBO, Congressional Budget Office, another federal agency full of PhDs, they've revised the deficit this year up from 1.4 to 1.7. Any rational fifth grader would have put it at 2 trillion at the beginning. We're not done with the year yet either. I can tell you, I'd be very surprised if it comes in below 2, and it won't be by much if it does. And that's $2 trillion we have to borrow to pay for government right now. And that is helping to create, along with the monies we owe, the almost 34 trillion we owe, it's helping to create the 79,000 in debt we are going as Americans every second. So poverty is an important part, but we have to go through everything that we're spending money on, and we have to come up with a way to make this work. And we have to come and if at all possible, to turn around the spending patterns in Congress. And I'll say this because we're staying away from politics, but neither Biden or Trump have said anything other than they guarantee they will continue all the entitlement payments. Well, that's not correct. They're not going to be continued for long. They may be continued for their lives, but they're going to explode, and we don't know when. and we can't afford to take a chance. We have to start addressing them right away. So basically, we've thrown Census Bureau in with Congressional Budget Office, and we've raised the same question. In a very nice way, we can say, stop withholding some of the facts. We want all the facts to reach a conclusion. In a nasty way, we can just say, stop lying to the American public. Okay, we deserve better. We pay your salary, sir, ma'am. So please stop lying. So basically, that's our subject today. It's how Census Bureau isn't giving the correct picture on poverty by their own definition, and it should be corrected. And we want to inform people. We feel that's the only way. The only way we're going to get out of our various situations today is to have an informed public. Again, sunshine and transparency is the only way out. It's not easy. It's painful. It involves a fight, but we have to start there. If we don't have the facts correct, if we don't have the understanding correct, we're not going to go in a correct direction. And it's imperative because we do have just a short time. We're blessed with a dollar that's still being accepted around the world, and I can guarantee you there'll come a day when it won't. And we need to get ready and understand how we can keep our dollar in that position and keep our country strong. So, Ishmael, why don't you have anything else to say about Census Bureau or poverty?
I think that hits especially with this topic. I would encourage folks to purchase the book, read it. There have been interesting Wall Street Journal articles written on it, and again, it's a really fascinating topic, as Mr. Chris has gone through. Are we getting the correct information from folks, and what do we do about it when we have it? To me, that's the most important thing, is us as a public understanding what is actually going on, and to be able to have rational arguments about it versus just taking things at face value. And to Mr. Chris' point, one way or another, it doesn't matter if it's right, left, whatever. Are we getting the information we as a public need? We can't be a properly voting public or a properly engaged public without getting the appropriate facts. And again, for decades, we can essentially count on government statistics, but if they are flawed and starting to demonstrate they are flawed, can we count on that? Can we make decisions that way? Can we vote that way? Can we advocate for different things that way? So to me, this is very critical we understand this, what's happening in census. And Mr. Chris, I think you can look at many other agencies, not just census. You look at CDC, you can look at the IRS, you can look at the Pentagon, you can look at the Government Accountability Office, whatever. They publish figures. Can we as a public count on it?
Well, the Pentagon, incidentally, has flunked its latest
Audit. Yep.
audit, 6 in a row. If we don't have accountability, we're not gonna get out of our situation, our spending problems, and the spending problems are going to start dictating to us. We're not gonna have control over them. And if you need an example, check out Argentina over the last 20 years. It's very alarming. And you can't assume that these PhDs don't know. They know what they're doing. Okay, they're working for the government. They don't directly bear a cost, and they are operating within their definitional realm, but they know the definitions are flawed. They're not stupid people. They're PhDs. Here, we're just going to use 5th grade math. We're not going even to algebra, but it's totally alarming. Now, I want to take a minute. Thank you, Ishmael. I want to take a minute and talk about next week's topic. I found an article in the Wall Street Journal on the decline in the belief in the American dream. So next week, we're going to spend talking about the American dream. In 2012, 53% of Americans believed in the American dream. In 2016, it was 48%. In 2023, it's 36% believe in the American dream. And I guarantee you, if you go back to last century, it was way up above
I'm
53.
certain we can find. I'm very curious what it was in 2007 as well, and 1995. I'm certain we can find numbers on that.
Well,
I'll actually
the
look on
polls were Wall Street Journal polls
that. Mhm.
taken with a couple thousand voters, and but they show the decline, and I imagine you see it on anybody's poll. So we're going to talk about the American dream, and I have a something I believe is so essential to it, and we're going to talk about it next week. And you know what that is, Ishmael? Uh, that's hope and opportunity. And we're going to discuss how they have changed. I think they're interrelated. I think they're a bit like the chicken and the egg. Uh,
Mhm.
if you have hope, if you're positive, you can often create opportunity, and that
Yep.
opportunity itself can create hope. So, but I think we're gonna bring hope and opportunity into the conversation. Our show is about sunshine and transparency. We welcome you here. We're going to try to be more regular every week. We're going to come out with a show, and we welcome any comments. We post papers every week on our topics. We invite you to read them on odysseyinvestments.info. We're going to start to give some discussion on the effect of finances too, since we are a financial company. I can say this right now in closing today. I've never seen in my life, and I'm an old guy, 74. I've
You're
never
not that old.
in my life
A very good
a
looking 74.
situation, well, thank you, but I am, a situation like I see today in the financial markets. Never seen it. And I'm going to leave it there for now, and we'll start to develop a little bit of talk about that too. So next week, the American Dream. Have a blessed week, and thank you so much for watching us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. We'll see you next Sunday.
Yep.